Today we're going to do a virtual tour of an archaeological site known as Fort Ancient. It's located in Ohio and it fits a lot of the Book of Mormon descriptions. This is an overview, sort of an aerial view of the site. Like I said, it's northeast of Cincinnati, Ohio, and there's the Miami River that goes up alongside it. It's on a sort of relatively flat hilltop, and it's steep. It's several hundred feet up there from the river, and they built walls all around the site. So here you can kind of get a sense of the dimensions. The walls in some parts are up to over 20 feet tall, other parts not quite as tall. Site encloses over 100 acres, so it's a very large site. It's like a mile and a half or so from the south walls to the north walls. It's about 3.5 miles of earthen walls built around it. On the site, there are a number of mounds and other things. There are stone mounds, other types of mounds at the site. This is sort of a picture of how they have considered to what the homes or habitations looked like. The way these were built is you would take a kind of a thin tree and you would bend it so it makes sort of an oval. You would have multiple of these to sort of make the frame, and then the holes in the top so the fire could escape, and these would be sort of multi-family or extended family type habitations. And at the site there's evidence of long-term habitation over hundreds of years. There's lots of typical Native American type artifacts there, arrowheads, tools, other things like that. There's a lot of use of copper. What we're going to do now is we're going to go to a site. This is put together by a couple of universities, Fort Ancient, and they've done some nice information at this particular. It's called ancientohiotrail.org.
When the northern extension was built, it included a new monumental gateway to the northeast. Here, though, there was a new design idea. The monumental gateway effect was translated into a pair of gate mounds that now were set outside the wall rather than on top of it.
Mounds such as these at Fort Ancient probably had many functions besides burials. In fact, very few of the mounds at Fort Ancient contain burial. They may have been used for signal fires.
There are craft shops that have been set up. So you can tell it was set up that really was like a large city.
Perhaps most spectacularly, they constructed this huge causeway across from the South Fort to the North Fort, filling up 3 gullies in the process. It took an amount of soil equal to all of the site's earthen walls combined.
The most elaborate of the site's 3 major passages is called the Great Gateway. Opening to this narrow ridge, it is the original north entrance to the oldest part of the enclosure. Passing in and out along the ridge would have taken the ancient visitors past mounds and limestone pavements, as if to remember the first generations of ancient ancestors, perhaps the first who made this hilltop a sacred place. And in several more nearby, he found many bodies in disarray, as if thrown in and buried in a hurry.
When you go to the site and to the museum, it's obviously a city. It's obviously a fortified city. It's an ideal natural defensive location. The walls are along the ridges, which would maximize for defensive purposes and not any particular shape or design. So it's clearly for defensive purposes. But despite that, the museum and the mainstream archaeologists will say, no, we think it was a ceremonial site and not for defensive purposes.
All 3 of the major gates have similar features. A pair of mounds, together with ramps passing through a large gap in the walls. Like the Great Gateway, the south gate opening was made higher by bringing the walls up, as if mounds were added to the top of the wall. A ramp bridges across the interior water ditch. A stone pavement stretched all the way down this steep hillside to the river.
The walls are up to 23 feet tall and interrupted by 67 openings. They were faced with limestone outside, perhaps 1/3 of the way up. Soil to build the walls was scraped from the surface of the plateau, or taken from the adjacent ditches or hillsides. The construction of the walls themselves was an enormous undertaking. Moore had calculated that there were over 13 million cubic feet of earth in the walls alone. And it's estimated that another equal amount of soil was also moved for other design purposes, like leveling hilltops or filling ravines. The whole northern plateau, for example, was stripped down to the clay subsoil to make it flatter and to provide material for the walls.
Talking about 26 million cubic feet. Each cubic foot would be like a load to move and put in the wall. So you're talking about an extremely large site that would have taken thousands of workers to build, unless you assume that it would have taken decades or give them hundreds of years to do that. Many times with these Hopewell sites, the museums and so forth, they don't want to accept a large city. So they'll imagine smaller populations. And then, but to do a site like that, to have that much earth movement, if you're talking about, only dozens or a couple hundred workers, you're talking about a project that would take decades or perhaps 100 years to build. Does it fit the right time frame? And the answer is yes. So even the museum there and also the radiocarbon dating dates it to the right Book of Mormon time frame. It shows that it was occupied from about 200 BC to about 400 AD, and that is according to the museum and the carbon dating there. Again, it encloses about 100 acres, which is an extremely large site. A location or a city that size could easily hold tens of thousands of people. Some of the evidence of long-term occupation comes from what they find there in terms of crop. And this is, the peer-reviewed scientific literature, again, confirming the site. They said that they began to build the earth walls approximately 100 BC. That's like right on target for what the Book of Mormon says. With Captain Moroni, if you'll recall, when they built the walls around the cities, it specifically says it was done in a manner that not known before by the children of Lehi. And from the text of the Book of Mormon, that time frame when Moroni would have done that was BC, about 72 BC. So for the carbon dating to come in and place it approximately 100 BC is incredibly on target for fitting this as a Book of Mormon city for when they built those walls. They had ponds that were deliberately constructed to hold water, and the reason why they know they were not just ditches or pits to hold water is that they can tell that they had moved clay to do a clay-lined pit, which would allow the water to stay there and not seep through. So these appeared to be deliberate. When they look at the crops, the first thing that they find is some storage sites that were quite large. In fact, they found seeds in some storage pits in tens of thousands or millions of seeds. So it appeared not only did they have ponds to save and hold water, but they also had storage pits to save and hold food. Fort Ancient had gardens and also had large fields for planting, which were just outside of the city, outside of the earthworks. They have done some archaeological work with that, and they've looked at the soil, they've looked at the seeds, and what they can tell from that is that the Native Americans there had sophisticated farming techniques. And this has overturned one of the key assumptions about Native Americans at that time. The assumption had always been that in the eastern United States, there was no large cities, there are hunter-gatherers, there's no crops and agriculture, and that has been proven incorrect. In the soil analysis, they found evidence that the fields were burned, the fields were tilled, and that there was seed selection to grow more productive plants. And the principal crops that they have found are some unusual ones to us. In particular, one of the main ones was a cousin of quinoa that's called goosefoot. They've also found that one of the crops that they used was a cousin of buckwheat. They also grew a lot of sunflowers, sunflower seeds, squash, maygrass seeds, and a plant called little barley. So the Book of Mormon refers to barley. So far in the Americas, they haven't found the same variety of barley that was used in the Old World. But there is a cousin called little barley that was used as a crop by these Native Americans in the Book of Mormon time frames.